Great. I think we'll get things started, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very much looking forward to sharing with you all some of the key kind of technology trends that we're seeing impact real estate markets around the world. I'm going to be joined a moment by my colleague Sanjaya Ranasinghe, who is our Global Director of Research and Development. He'll share a little bit about what he and his team does. My name's Andrew Freitas. For those who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I am the Director of Business Development for our North American business. And what I thought I would do, I know we have various folks from various cities around North America joining us today. And so what I wanted to do was give a very high-level background on who WiredScore is. I think maybe some of you are wondering, who's WiredScore and why is this the company to ultimately be sharing what is at the forefront of technology in real estate. So as a starting point, WiredScore sets the global standard for technology in the built world. Many of you know us for our WiredScore and SmartScore certifications. Just a kind of quick background on how we were started. We were founded globally and are still globally headquartered in New York City. We actually started as a public-private partnership in conjunction with then Mayor Michael Bloomberg. What was happening in the early to mid 2000s was, a lot of technology kind of type companies were migrating into New York, a city kind of known more for financial services and others. The technology companies, when migrating there, were identifying a little bit of a knowledge gap that was ultimately creating a lack of transparency in the real estate market. Meaning, as they were looking for spaces across the city to call home, the market could share rental rates and vacancy rates and labor pools and proximity to transit, but ultimately when it came to understanding how well connected these buildings were, ergo how could they leverage the technology and digital connectivity to run their businesses, this is where the knowledge gap existed. And so WiredScore certification was born, and we are the standard for global real estate in digital connectivity. We've quickly grown around the world. We are very proud now to be doing business in almost 30 countries. We most recently launched our APAC business out of Singapore, and we're really excited to be growing so quickly geographically. And many of our clients work with us in many of these countries. In terms of just kind of high-level global stats, we are very proud to be working with well over 800 owners and developers around the world. We've certified over 800 million square feet. And I think what we're most proud about is that 8 million people now live and work in WiredScore certified buildings. With that, I think I'm going to welcome my colleague Sanj to this virtual stage. Again, Sanj is our Global Director of Research and Development. Sanj, I'll let you do justice to what it is that you and your team do, and we'll kick things off. And before we do that, just a quick bit of housekeeping, folks. You will see that there is an Ask the Speaker function. So as you'll see here, we do have three kind of key sections that Sanj's going to talk through. I'm going to pause and share some questions from the group at the end of each of these sections. So please do feel free to drop questions in there in real time. Over to you, Sanj.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I'm Sanj. As Andrew says, I'm Global Director of R&D at WiredScore. My team's responsible for the development of the scorecards that make up a core part of our certifications. As part of this responsibility, we have to ensure our scorecards constantly not only reflect best-in-class building attributes, but also that these building features solve problems that users of real estate face with respect to digital connectivity and smart technology, both in their homes, but most importantly in their place of work. This presentation is going to cover three key areas where we believe the interaction between real estate and technology is evolving most dramatically of late in the world of offices. Firstly, the part connectivity and digital technology plays in enabling hybrid working. Secondly, how cloud computing has evolved over the last 5 years and how it now sets a template for how buildings interact with technology. And finally, how builders can align themselves to that cloud computing model to become technology providers themselves. So first of all, hybrid working. This is a much talked about topic of late, and rightly so, as it's changing our relationship with real estate. So this section will cover how technology can optimize hybrid working. I really think optimize is the key word here, as we've all been shifted into a hybrid world by necessity from the pandemics that we faced in the last couple of years. And there's a real risk that success here is seen as getting to an acceptable compromise rather than actually using technology to optimize the hybrid way of working. So as I said, those lockdowns of the last of 2020 and 2021 caused by the global pandemic accelerated our need to work hybridly. Suddenly, everything was happening from a single physical location, our homes. We were completely reliant on technology to enable most aspects of what we had for living, working, and connecting. Therefore, technology brands became the go-to words for these key actions. A typical day in the life of me would be that I would Zoom for work, I'd Peloton for my well-being, and I'd house party with my friends. I think what's really interesting when we look at this in reflection is how old this already sounds. House parties active users slumped last year to the extent it stopped operating. And Peloton is no longer the poster child of success it was once seen as, both from a business and social point of view. However, there have been successes in this time, and Zoom is the one that I'd really like to dive into, which is still baked into most of our lives at work. As such, what we saw was those of us with great connectivity at home, working for companies with a forward-thinking approach to both ways of working and their technology, such as using cloud-based software platforms, discovered the potential of hybrid working. The office world needs to now enable us to move from the position we've been in those last 2 years, where we're solely reliant on technology, to one where technology enables the way we want to work. And more to the point, most of us are in a position where our home lives, technology is enabled via things such as Amazon Echo or Google Homes. But our offices are really starting to fall behind, as these technologies from Amazon and Google for homes can't just be deployed in enterprise environments. So thinking about this from the perspective of the office market, hybrid gives the opportunity for us to create the office as a destination, and landlords and developers have an ever-growing responsibility here to help deliver that experience. It's beneficial to tenants and owners that the office is seen as a destination, but we now as individuals need a clear reasoning on how our office counters that trend for us to work from home. As an example of this, I want to talk about how I mentioned Zoom previously as being one of those key technology successes from the technology fast forward the last 2 years. With hybrid working, video conference meetings are here to stay, and a technology-enabled office can actually offer a better experience than being at home for many reasons. Those include things such as simple as lighting, video and audio capabilities, but also the experience of video conferences improved by having enterprise-grade internet with great latency. So latency is caused by the delay an internet connection provides. Initially, latency came to public understanding when the mainstream due to gamers. Gamers wanted the best performance in their games, and they would look for the lowest latency connection possible. But it's now really starting to become prevalent within video conferencing experience, and that's due to this thing that we know as a Zoom fatigue, where actually what's happening is the latency of that connection is impairing our ability to be fully immersed in a video conferencing call. So this is because a video conferencing call is really hosted in a data center somewhere in the world. The lower the latency, so the lower the delay of your connection between you and that data center, has that direct impact on your perceived experience. As I mentioned, this latency is both a factor of how far you are from the data center, but also, and most controllably, the quality of the internet connection you have to that data center. So to put into context in numbers what this latency really, how it impacts us. If we look at the human brain, it has a latency of about a hundredth or 0.01 of a second. So the closer something happens to this time delay, the more realistic it feels. During a Zoom call, say if we're based in the US, via a US data center, this has a latency of around 0.02 seconds. But if that same call was hosted in Europe, that same call would have a delay of around 0.1 seconds, so about 10 times the latency of the brain. This subconscious delay not only makes it harder for your brain to process what's going on the call, but can ruin the flow of that conversation. If you feel like you're always interrupting people on these calls, that's from latency. And also from a well-being perspective, it can also be incredibly exclusionary to those of us who are more introverted, as they may feel less empowered to speak in these scenarios that video conferences are covering. So bringing it back to how that great office experience can provide technology enablement for hybrid working, I think there's three key considerations that we need to look at. Firstly, can people work from anywhere in your building? People are used to working anywhere and being able to work from anywhere in a building. And this extends to where within their office building they want to work. We're no longer stuck to our desks, and really our desk may no longer be the most productive place for us to work in the office. I think a great example of this is how the cell phone is now the primary means of communications for most office workers. Therefore, we really need to understand how your building is working and make sure best practices with regard to common area Wi-Fi are implemented in amenity space. It's important to be aware that both mobile and Wi-Fi signal have significant challenges within buildings, so need to be carefully planned in. Secondly, successfully managing new responsibility within your building requires a new skill set for both cybersecurity and data protection. Occupiers of buildings have become much more aware of the fact that their data is being used for more and more by different companies. So what we've really seen is this, in addition to cybersecurity threats, are becoming ever-growing concerns for occupiers. Finally, people want to know the experience they have in the office will be great and better than that at home. This flight to quality of office space has connectivity at its core. Beyond providing Wi-Fi in common areas, landlords and developers need to think about how that base building internet connection can be used to deliver a better experience throughout the building. A great starting point for this is to look at how technology can be used to enhance the way occupiers enter and access different areas of the building beyond their own tenant space. And features such as seamless access control to amenity space have really started to become prevalent.
Thank you, Sanj. Just having a look here at the question board. Here's one for you. So this person says, could not agree more on the importance of cell phones. I think that goes without saying. We have had an increasing number of complaints about the lack of cell coverage in our buildings. How do we get ahead of this problem?
It's a great question. I think there's two parts to it. First of all, measure what you have. So a radio frequency benchmark test is a test that a building can carry out that measures the cell coverage in the building. It takes a few hours and it costs a few $1,000s, but it will give you a picture of coverage across all the major cell operators and carriers, and is really the first step to think about what you need to do to address that in-building mobile capability, be that from a repeater or a DAS or a small cell solution. The first step really is to understand where the problems lie within your building.
Great. Yeah, and I think, fair to say, Sanj, that, it's certainly the rollout of 5G. That's what we're hearing from our clients typically, is that increase of 5G coverage is really what's created a lot more challenges on the indoor network. So just becoming more important day to day for landlords to consider.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's become a difficult one where things like 5G and the latest iterations of Wi-Fi offer great experience to users, but actually become even harder to get that signal propagating properly through a building. So it's a double-edged sword there that you need to work with. That point of overall connectivity really brings us nicely into our second section, which is on the second topic I'm going to cover is on cloud computing. Not only why it matters for tenants and occupiers as they go through their digital transformation, but also how it can act as a template for how buildings can start to offer more technology services to those same tenants. So whilst there are many technical components of how cloud computing actually works, the key benefit of it is to office workers is that it enables people to work pretty much anywhere with a multitude of devices without having to worry about having enough storage or having the latest version of a document. This is made possible by using the internet to provide software, storage, and processing power via cloud solutions. So compared to the world of work at the turn of the 21st century, the internet, where we're no longer reliant on our desk and our computer and the telephone on that desk to be productive at work, because with the internet, we can really work from anywhere. And there are three key components to how cloud computing has become so successful. Cloud computing split into these three key areas of as-a-service layers. Firstly, software. These are the tools that we use every day. Arguably, Salesforce was the first true software as a service product and has never actually been installed on a computer. It has always run from your web browser. More recently, cloud platforms, or PaaS, from names slightly less well known as such as Shopify and Twilio, have become prevalent. These allow companies to focus on the USP of their own business rather than everything else they need to enable you to work online. So Shopify enables you to create an e-commerce store that processes payments without having to do all the technical integrations with payment vendors and stock handlers. Twilio allows businesses to communicate over email, voice, SMS, and video without having to manage those relationships with the cell operators or email clients. So these platforms power businesses to operate efficiently. Finally, infrastructure hosted in the cloud, IaaS. AWS stands for Amazon Web Services. It's part of the Amazon business that offers website hosting, storage, and processing power. The as a service part here allows you to upgrade that storage, processing power, etc., to scale to meet the demands of your requirements. Rather than having to guess up front what computer server hardware you need, 5 years ahead of time, you can just scale that as you need it. What cloud computing really enables is for customers to pay per play, be that for that software features, volume of sales they need to manage through their website, or the raw hardware performance they need to operate. And cloud computing has become a huge source of revenue for the companies I mentioned before that offer this as a service product offering. Not only in absolute terms, but also in year-on-year growth figures. These are really attractive numbers to look at. And what it really shows is how people and companies alike are much more comfortable for paying for services like these than they ever have been before. So when we think about how cloud computing really impacts the built environment for offices, I think there's 3 considerations landlords and developers really need to take into account. And these are all really based on the fact that with cloud computing, if you're without the internet, you can't work. It is no longer just a fact of you can't access the internet. So firstly, the majority of the route for getting internet into tenant space is actually through the landlord controlled areas, basements, risers and rooftops. Coupled with the fact that the majority of internet outages are down to physical infrastructure problems, this leads to the fact that landlords and developers must provide the capability of secure, dedicated infrastructure for tenants' internet connections to be resilient. Secondly, as the importance of tenant internet connections has become more and more so, given these sort of cloud computing requirements, tenants are adding more and more redundancy into how they get their connectivity. Landlords can support this both by offering separate intakes and pathways within a building for internet services to be routed to the tenant space, but also ensuring as many internet service providers as possible can serve the building. And finally, cloud computing performance is now a key driver of productivity in a business. Much like the latency example I went through earlier, tenants are looking how the quality of their internet connection can impact their business performance. This quality of service used to be based purely on speed, but now quality of service has a number of other factors associated with it. And often this quality of service is best delivered by a more specific enterprise internet provider and use features such as dark fiber connectivity to really optimize how people are using the cloud. Therefore, as a landlord, being proactive about the range of providers and services your building can support will set you apart from the competition when you look to how you can best support cloud services.
Thank you, Sanj. It's always funny for me when I talk to owners, and the truest show of how cloud has impacted the tenant spaces themselves is how server rooms have shrunk. Right? Mm-hmm. They used to take such a large element of a tenant's footprint, and I know even in New York, where we're globally headquartered, we don't have a server room. Right? We live so entirely on the cloud. Yeah. And so you can really, brings to life how mission critical that connectivity is. So thank you for that. I do have one quick question for you. I'm just kind of scrolling here. Okay, so this person asks, I think of internet options as just having the provider or providers that my tenant wants, but you're making it sound like there are other factors to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So, we could almost call it now a traditional internet options that enterprises were having. Really, were focused on supporting their web browser and internet cloud. You're just in a position where it's getting more and more specific. For example, this is where we're really seeing dark fiber come into play, where tenants can actually really own the end-to-end connection. So they know where their cloud platform is being hosted and what data center they're accessing most of the time. So instead of going via a traditional internet provider, they're using a dark fiber service that the landlord has helped make sure is installed in the building via their interface with physical fiber connectors to actually connect directly from their tenant space all the way to the server that's holding their cloud platform. So those users in the office are getting the optimized usage out of their cloud platforms.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. I mean, look, when you think about incentivizing your employees to come to work, having that such increased optimization of just being able to do your day-to-day work from the office is a key element. Hearing that from many owners as well. Great, thank you.
Yes, that's great. Thanks for the question. So as we jump into the third section, I want to go over how buildings need to and can offer more services to tenants via digital technology. If we take a moment to look back at that cloud section, cloud computing successes, I believe, can be migrated into the world of real estate. The customers of cloud platforms are committing to an increased spend on services, layered with additional commitment of adopting more and more features that those services provide. And this creates a really high barrier to switch out of any given service. And I think that's really an appealing consideration for any tenancy. And via technology, there's a starting point for how real estate can use this model of as a service offerings from smart building functionality and making that available to tenants in a piecemeal way. But just to set that into context, we are really seeing this shift from tenants. These statistics from our recent research reports highlight the potential and opportunity landlords have. As you can see, there's a motivation for lease signers to move into smart buildings, but their workforce really needs tech to just work, with almost all decision makers pushing for smart capabilities, but occupiers of those buildings not actually feeling enabled to use what is there for them. As such, landlords have a great opportunity to be part of that technology enablement requirement I discussed earlier. So, how can technology be deployed by landlords? If we take that same as a service model from the cloud computing section, we can see they're the same ideas of software, platform, and infrastructure. And these are possible within real estate. These three factors, software, platform, and infrastructure, are actually the three fundamentals or layers of how a smart building should be structured from a technical perspective. However, I think before I dive into the detail of these specific technologies, I think what's key to ensure is that technology has a purpose and is implemented in a way that building owners, operators, and occupants can make best use of the capabilities these technologies enable. Actually, a core facet of our SmartScore certification is not so much looking at the technology, but looking at those use cases or functionalities, as we call them, that connect these three technology layers together into meaningful outcomes for people that use the building. But back to those technology aspects. Firstly, software. In the software stable, we're going to look at the building app, which is most commonly thought about, but as what you can use for technology in the building, but actually we believe is a category all by itself. Then from a platform perspective, creating a common data interface enables a tenant to truly and efficiently integrate their workplace design into the fabric of the building. And finally, the infrastructure of a converged network offers a way for the building to be able to rapidly scale that technology it can integrate and support. So firstly, onto that software layer and building apps. The huge advantage of introducing a software offering into a building via an app is that the occupiers in the main will already have the device, their phone, to interface with that software. So it's a really low barrier to adoption. So this makes it relatively light lift to implement at a trial stage even. There are also multiple approaches that a building app can take within each with their own advantage, which I'll dive into in a moment. But just to give a slight caveat, that arguably there are better places to spend your money when considering what technology to invest in a building, but apps are really a good way to uplift that user experience rapidly, given that convenience of getting users up and running. So the three layers that I really see to look at here are communications, community, and control. So different apps will offer these three different layers of functionality. A communication type app, this is the simplest form of app that doesn't actually integrate with the building or the people that use the building at all. It just applies a layer over which emails and calendar bookings can be implemented to allow you to, communicate with building staff or pre-book some amenity space. In effect, it's a way to get property management notifications and coordination away from traditional email and calendar appointments into a standalone interface. And we see it a lot used in co-working setups in the main. The next level of app adds in this community level and provides a level of configuration of the experience to the building the user's in. It provides insights into activities in and around the building, but still key here is it doesn't actually need to integrate with any of the base building systems themselves. And that comes with that final level, which is that of a control-based app, which actually enables users to understand how the building is performing for them and to some extent let them control the space they're in. These are by far and away the most expensive and extensive integrations, and you really need to ensure you've got the right partners and also the right engagement from your tenants to do this. But a great place to start with looking at control type apps is with access and environmental control. So the next level down, we're looking at that interface or platform side, which is having a common data interface in place enables features like those listed on this slide to be delivered in a scalable and effective manner. The common data interface is a growing part of smart building developments, but it's still a relatively new design approach. We're seeing some developers like Edge Technologies and Lendlease doing this as part of their development process, but we've also seen some real interesting prop tech companies looking to disrupt the likes of JCI and Honeywells of the world that have been trying to build this themselves as well. The common data interface is a method in which all the information from separate base building systems, such as your HVAC, IT, access control, lighting, comes together in a single interface to provide whole building data analysis, reporting, and enable the control of subsystems via interoperability with these subsystem controllers. So the core features of this common data interface are that data is brought into the platform from all the systems in the building via physical or software connections, that data is then processed to highlight where in the building it is relevant to and what it actually represents, such as temperature or location. Access to that data for tenants, building operation staff, and building ownership is controllable. Therefore, that's cybersecurity and data privacy being two key considerations that are baked into how you set one of these common data interfaces up. And whilst the point of the platform is to allow any interface, e.g. tenant or workplace app, to be built on top of it, having knowledge of systems that do work with it as well enable you as a landlord to deliver yet further value to your tenants. So much like the Shopify platform in the cloud section, this common data interface doesn't need to know what the end use case is, so what you're selling or what you're trying to stock, just to ensure that all those components are available in a cohesive way for someone to create the use cases they need. The final piece of the service offering a building can provide is the converged network, which is compiled to that infrastructure service offering from the cloud section. A building-wide converged network is required to deliver on any intelligent building, which I really think is something that all buildings should be aspire to being in some guise. Linked to the common data interface, a converged network provides the cabling, building infrastructure, and interconnection between hardware, such as switches, for the disparate systems in the building to be run in a uniform manner. While this can enable the interconnection and interoperability of systems, more importantly, it provides building owners with a scalable way to install, maintain, and decommission technology within a building. A landlord-owned cabling network is a key part of a converged network, and this ensures risers are best prepared to handle the technology requirements of the building, rather than having multiple sets of cabling traversing the same pathways. An approachable way to start this converged network journey is to start with an audit of the base building systems, such as your HVAC and lighting and power management, and see how these systems infrastructure can be brought together into a common setup that can then scale for other systems to be added to. Not only can this approach help better manage the way building operates, but it's also a foundational component of a thorough cybersecurity assessment of the building. Having that control and management of all the systems infrastructure ensures policies and processes for data and cybersecurity methods can be applied effectively. So bringing this back to those key considerations for landlords. As I mentioned in the hybrid working section, tenants are having to rapidly evolve their workplace technology solution set. As such, apps data, and infrastructure components that landlords can offer can really start to differentiate what tenants can do with their space. The three components of building operations we've just run through are typical parts of a smart or even just a modern building development, but also can be used piecewise to offer specific tenant services depending on their requirements. In terms of how to evolve your building, the following should be taken into account. Firstly, consider how you can reuse, repackage, and resell the features of your building today, and be creative with what else you can be converted into a service. There will be features you can offer today from existing base building technology, and I've highlighted a couple of here, like space utilization and air reporting are really good starting points. Secondly, you don't need to know your tenant's exact requirements to be able to enable the functionality they'll need in their workspace. So this really does work for the multi-tenant build to spec buildings, rather than those with a lead tenant or those which are like build to suit a specific tenant. A wider and wider range of technology integrations will be needed to support tenant workplaces solutions. So consider what other parts of the building's capabilities could be opened up for integration. And finally, a truly integrated software, platform, and infrastructure approach to building technology will enable a feature set greater than achievable by just having the software or platform or infrastructure systems themselves. And this should be the aim, not just to providing, this should be the aim for all buildings, not just thinking of providing, first of all, that communication style app. So really you can start there, but really think about that journey to evolve, to integrate all of these layers of the smart building stack I've been through. I think just before I jump on to overall conclusions, I'm wondering, Andrew, if there's any other questions we want to run through on this section.
I actually just had one come through, Sanj, on this section, and we do have a couple more, but I'll maybe let you go to conclusions first. So this one, I think probably the best you could ask here, right? So you're talking about buildings as a service. So can you further clarify how me as a building owner can actually generate revenue through a smarter, intelligent building?
That's a great question. And like, to be completely honest, we're not seeing this at scale today. But what we're really seeing is that expanding base building services to tenants is the future of real estate. As we mentioned, like, we really want to work out how we're building the way that tenant workplaces need to evolve into how the building's technology stack can enable it. We talk a lot about amenities, but we really see that digital amenities are the future of real estate. This means offering things, as I said, like indoor air quality monitoring for a fee, and then seeing how occupancy sensing and space utilization for a fee could even start to be built on that. One thing we are almost seeing is actually how, with the criticality of 5G and future of Wi-Fi that we talked about in that first section of this presentation, that can start to be monetized. Ultimately, tenants want better experience, and they'll go to buildings that can offer that, even if it comes at that additional cost.
Yeah, I think that's pretty key, right, Sanj? I mean, right now, I think a lot of our clients are struggling with making sure that they are meeting their clients' needs, right? And what that means more than it ever has is their employees' needs, right? I think that for so long, these real estate decisions were made, to put it bluntly, without the employees really in mind, and never before have you had to incentivize your people to come work, to put it in simple terms. So I think what we talk about with our clients a lot that resonates is, you kind of touched on that, there was not technology for technology's sake, but having a vision to what that is going to mean from an impact to the users. And if you have that as a starting point, then it's really interesting to see where this can go in terms of revenue opportunity. But that won't happen unless you have these things in place, right?
Exactly that. I think this is like playing catch up on this is the hard thing, having the technology and in really thinking about the technology you already have and how you can best utilize it, rather than thinking I've got to start from scratch, is a key starting point in any journey on this.
Yeah, I think we've lost count at how many of our clients we've talked to frustrated by a building app which they had invested in and quite frankly was never used, right? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see when you touched on those three different types of apps. I think the ones that we've seen been most successful have been the ones that integrate a little bit of elements from across all three, right? And really kind of meet the user at the need, so to speak. Yeah. If you want to run through kind of the high-level conclusions, Sandra, I do have a couple more for you after that.
Great. Let's do that. So I just want to bring this together. So across those three topics I covered today. I think there are three conclusions I'd like, to provide us like takeaways, more as like a thought-provoking thing to extend these conversations. Firstly, the evolution of hybrid working is going to put a huge focus on the technology enablement of office buildings to ensure the office is that destination your tenants' workforce wants to go to. Secondly, with the continual growth of cloud computing services, your tenants' reliance on internet, Wi-Fi, and mobile will continue to grow. And as a landlord, you need to make sure your building can accommodate for this. And finally, take advantage of the fact that any previous barriers to tech adoption have been wiped away via the pandemic, and promote the capabilities of your base building technology as a means for you to get your tenant fully engaged with your building's potential.
Thanks, Sam. I do have a couple questions
Great.
here. I think I just want to comment on one thing. I had a funny conversation with a client. He's been in real estate a very long time, we'll say that. And he put it in a way to me that hit home. He said, if you had told me he leads a large global, real estate company. And he said, if you had told me when I started my career that one day I would have to incentivize my employees to come to work, I would have fallen off my chair, right? Or otherwise I wouldn't have understood what you meant. And I think what's interesting and what a lot of our forward-thinking clients are thinking about this is saying that is what our clients are telling us. So how do we, look, we are obviously very all bullish being in the industry on office in general. And it's not going away, but to really stand out and meet the polarization, I think, of these assets, right, in a lot of ways. We've heard the flight to quality and things of that nature. It's really enabled by technology, but it has to be done thoughtfully. So I think your points are well taken. I'm going to go back to the cell phone. Seems to be one that people are hitting on here. So back to that section there, Sanj. Can you actually explain the difference of a DAS versus a booster when you talked about the enhancing mobile connectivity in doors?
It's a great question. So what you have to think about is with a building, if you've got several thousand people inside of it, each of those takes a little bit of capacity from the mobile network. So if you use a booster, what you're doing in effect is you have your cell tower outside on a rooftop somewhere, and it's connecting to the building, and it kind of presents itself as one user. And you're basically then using that booster technology to bring the signal inside, but you're not increasing the capacity. So you kind of have this position where you've got thousands of people in the building, basically connecting to the macro network as if it was one user. So that quality of experience is going to go down and down. Whereas with a DAS, what you're bringing in is dedicated capacity for mobile, for cell signal within the building. And you're bringing a system which understands the number of people in the building and really gives yourself that same quality of service. We're back to this term of quality of service, quality of experience that users are going to get with their cell phone that they expect, when they're out and about or in their homes.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the way you explained it to me a long time ago was you're effectively creating your own mobile network, right? Like
exactly,
your own bubble, so to speak, not impacted by other factors that you can control. And I think that's really powerful when you think about it. I mean, I remember at a previous role being on the 35th floor of an office tower in downtown Toronto and had my ear pasted against the window, and this was prior to 5G by a long shot. So these situations are real, and the question we had prior would allude to it. So there was one others here. I guess this would be going kind of spanning around the cloud computing and overall connectivity within the building itself. Internet connectivity specifically. So this person's asking, don't all internet connections simply go over the same cables, I guess physically? So in that case, why is having numerous actually important?
Cool. The simple answer is no, to a certain extent. Like as I talked about with the prevalence of dark fiber now, as a tenant, we've seen this with international tenants. Actually, I'm based in London, as you might be able to tell, but we actually had a case where we had two of our buildings, one in London, one in Frankfurt in Germany, and the same tenant in both. And as part of their requirements for their building, they actually needed to know the dedicated fiber route between their two offices. They actually had to engage with different providers and say, right, I need to know every single city my fiber cables go, and I need diversity and redundancy between my two offices to the extent that I need them to go to different cities. So one routed via Amsterdam in the Netherlands and another routed via Paris in France. So I think what you can say is that whilst there'll always be a point that it looks like it's coming from one cable, Maybe that's your Wi-Fi access point that you're sitting out in your office space. As you wind back, you need to get that separation of cabling, firstly through your building, firstly out of your building, and then thinking about, many of the leading tenants we're seeing are actually saying, like, I need to understand my cable routing of all my global offices, and I need as much separation and, as you put it so well, different cables, maintaining my connection between all my offices to ensure that if something does go down, be that within the building, be that outside the building, I still have not only a continuation of service. So this is going beyond like disaster recovery planning. I need to maintain back to that quality of experience, be able to access my cloud services best as possible to maintain my tenant and my employee productivity.
Yeah, and I want to ask a quick follow-up on dark fiber, but prior to that, I mean, even at the simplest terms, we've been seeing this trend in multiple countries where the larger companies, albeit, are simply not willing or actually able to sign leases in buildings that don't even just have two physically different points of entry coming to the building, right?
Yeah.
And that's with or without dark fiber, just that having physically redundant entry points, mitigates a lot of their risk from a connectivity perspective. A quick follow-up on the dark fiber, Sanj. If I'm an owner who knows they don't have that offering in their assets and would like to consider that, what would you recommend as maybe a first couple of steps towards that?
Yes, I think it's really like what you'll find is that a lot of the enterprise fiber providers. So, like if we look, beyond the Verizons and the Verizon of the world, like into the places, there are sort of specific companies like that you can look at, such as sort of Join or Essensis, which actually start to offer that as a service, and you can start engaging with them. And providers are always looking to come into buildings. So I think there is a moment where like landlords can actually go on the front foot and say, look, we've got this space, we've got this number of tenants, and work is going to be here. There's going to be value here for you to get those services, and really start to dig into the service offerings that the providers in the building already can offer, so that you're almost acting like an intermediary. And I think that's a really useful like feature, and something at WiredScore that we're looking to understand a bit more as well in detail, like how we can help landlords really start to promote all the connectivity offerings that tenants can access in their building.
Wonderful. I was gonna let you go, and I've had another one come through here. This person is saying that our organization does not have technical resources in house. So what's the best way to start that smart journey?
I think it's almost better not to have those technical resources in house. It's look at the people that are using your building. Look at a bit of engagement with your tenants and their staff, or even with your own building staff. And what we see is, and we cover this in our SmartScore certification, where we have a list of around 40 what we call user functionalities, like jobs to be done in the building. That list is available on our website, on our SmartScore microsite, where you can see those list of stories, but really understand what people in your building want to do, and then start like working backwards and saying, right, these are the jobs that need to be done. How can we start thinking about technology? And then once you've got your, those requirements at the top, there's a multitude of technology providers that can start working this space. And we've really found that, what's really interesting with our SmartScore certification, not to put too much of a plug because that's, not my job, but is that it starts to really act as a useful framework. So we get those user functionalities, and we found the next bit that people really generally go to is then try and bring that into a cohesive smart building strategy. So still, before touching any purchasing decisions on systems or infrastructure, get the strategic part. So what's the strategy itself? Like, how are you going to implement features? What are the most important? Then layer onto that, what are you thinking from a policy perspective around cybersecurity and data privacy? I think once you've got those key these are the jobs to be done, and this is our governance side of it, our strategic side of it, then you're in a really great place to efficiently and effectively engage with technologists to start build up that solution set.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think, what I've heard in conversations with our clients, particularly those working with us on the SmartScore side, is it's important to not kind of try to boil the ocean, so to speak, right? I mean, can go, it's quite a journey, right? And it's really interesting to see how many of our clients on the Smart Score side have really opted to kind of come in at, a certified or a silver level, which is a hell of an accomplishment, as we know,
Yeah.
but to then kind of continue that journey and have that vision there. And I think that's kind of been more of the strategic approaches in what we've seen that way. I think that's it for questions, Sanj. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's joined. Thank you to those asking questions. There are multiple ways to get in touch with us. I think we've got here on a following slide, Sanj. We're proud to be putting out different bits of thought leadership and content for you all. But please don't ever hesitate to reach out with questions and issues might be coming across in your own assets and portfolios. So with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. And we'll hope to talk to you all soon.